Apparently, being homeless now is a crime. No, like literally, Donald Trump just signed a bill for it to be a crime. You will get arrested. You will get some prison time. What the frick is a homeless person supposed to do? Hide under a freaking rock? Not exist? Y'all acting like this is a crime that someone chooses to commit. This is not a crime. Maybe if people actually sat there and helped, people wouldn't be homeless. And now y'all making things even worse for them by making it a crime to where they could go to jail. But then again, y'all is always talking about the tax dollars and how too much expenses, but now y'all gonna be wasting even more money because now y'all gotta feed them in prison. Which technically, I feel like if you're homeless, you technically get a roof over your head and food every day. Kind of feels like a win-win, but also then again, your freedom is taken away from you. I don't know anymore. I feel like someone needs to really take in consideration the actions that keep, being made and the actions that keep being taken, because something is off. Something is off.
Let's call this what it is: the logical endpoint of neoliberalism, where the market is God, the poor are disposable, and the role of government is to protect property, not people. We are told there is no money for universal housing, but always seems to find money for war, bailing out banks and billionaires. It isn't about charity, it's about justice, and that starts by shifting our understanding. The problem isn't the people on the street, it's the system that puts them there.
So dig this. Today, Trump signed an executive order to force cities to lock up homeless people in institutions to clean up the streets. Because nothing says freedom like forced psychiatric commitment. Clearly, like everything else he does, this is a PR campaign to make homeless people disappear like our immigrants. If people don't see poverty, it just doesn't exist, right? It must be gone. Like magic. Poof! He's dangling federal money to cities that ban urban camping, otherwise called having a place to sleep, and wants to defund programs that actually reduce harm because apparently helping people is too woke. Sorry, Jesus. Look, people don't lose their homes because they're crazy. People go crazy because they lost their homes. You don't kidnap people without a home. You get them housing. That's the solution. Human dignity is the cure. But the felon, he thinks the solution is to make homelessness illegal and mental health optional. We're not solving the crisis. We're criminalizing the symptom. Bullshit.
This law punishes poverty instead of addressing it. And let's be honest, they are not about safety. They are about aesthetics. They are about protecting poverty values. They are about keeping the uncomfortable reality of poverty out of sight for middle-class consumers and tourists.
All right, y'all, buckle up. Let's break this mess down real plain and real raw. Donald J. Trump just signed an executive order that makes it easier for cities to forcefully remove homeless people from the streets. Not with housing, not with dignity, but with handcuffs, forced treatment, and punishment. And the MAGA folks are clapping, like he's done solved world hunger. No, MAGA, he just made being poor and sick a federal crime. So Trump's order does three dangerous things, right? The first and the most obvious is it criminalizes homelessness. If you're caught sleeping outside, not because you want to, but because you have no other place to go, this order makes it legal for cities to arrest you, fine you, and toss you into involuntary treatment, like it's the 1950s again. Number two, it defunds reduction programs. Clean needle exchanges, Narcan, safe use sites. These save lives. But Trump's order tells agencies to stop funding those, based on a lie that they promote drug use. That's like shutting down hospitals because people are getting sick. And number three, it kills the housing first model. For over 20 years, Republicans and Democrats agreed. Get folks into stable housing first, then treat mental health and addiction. Why? Because that works for some people. But Trump wants to reverse that. He's basically saying, no help unless you're sober first, knowing damn well that people cannot recover while sleeping in a damn alley. But I'm going to tell you why he's doing this. And it's pretty simple. He's not trying to fix homelessness. He's basically trying to erase it from public view before the election. I don't know how many times I have to tell you, Trump does not do policy. He does a lot of performance. He wants cities to look clean for the cameras, even if that means pushing people into prisons, jails, psych wards, and early graves. You don't have to take my video for it. Fact check me. Housing first saves lives. This was proven by HUD, the CDC, and every major homelessness.org in the country. Harm reduction reduces overdose deaths. Trump's own CDC has that data. He just doesn't care. Not to mention that most people are homeless because housing costs too much. It's not always the fact they choose the streets. That's the lie that rich people tell just to avoid accountability. This, to me, is just not leadership. It's not presidential. This is authoritarian cruelty dressed up in a goddamn flag. America's homeless crisis is not going to be solved by police vans and padded rooms. It's only going to be solved by building affordable housing, offering real mental health care, and giving people a damn chance. You can't punish poverty out of people, but you can build a society where we don't throw folks away. If the government can force homeless people into institutions for their own good, how long before they come for anyone who's poor, sick, addicted, or just inconvenient? Think about it.
Thanks to Donald Trump's executive order called Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets, it is now illegal to be homeless, and cities and states have the right to remove homeless people to be put in either rehab institutions, which are tent cities built on the outskirts of town, or prison. Those are the two choices. He said this all along. This was well outlined in Agenda 47. Veterans, these are some of your brothers and sisters. It reads, shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. Forced rehab for substance use disorder or mental health illness in literal tent cities. Maybe like Alligator Alcatraz? I don't know. Is this what y'all voted for? Never mind. Please don't answer that. Please don't answer that. I don't want y'all in my comments. I don't want you anywhere near me.
President Trump signed an executive order that makes it easier for states to remove homeless encampments and force homeless people into mental health or addiction treatment programs. Our Lisa Desjardins explains.
President Trump's order lays out his goal clearly. He wants to move more people who are homeless into long-term institutions and hospitals, including involuntarily. He also plans a dramatic shift in federal funds, away from programs that place people into housing first and instead pushing for tougher, immediate requirements for treatment. Homeless rates have been steadily rising since 2017. A federal count found that more than 770,000 people were living in shelters or outside on a single night last year. For more on this latest executive action and what it may mean, I'm joined by David Ovalle, national reporter focusing on opioids and addictions for The Washington Post. There is a great deal in this order, David. First, does President Trump have the power to either encourage or tell states that they need to put more people in institutions, even involuntarily?
Well, no, not specifically, and that's one of the interesting things about this order is that they're really trying to incentivize and push states into doing this. Remember, states set their particular laws, they set their criteria for how they handle involuntary commitments. So really, this is a state issue, but the federal government certainly has a lot of sway, and they can, for example, in the executive order, they talk about prioritizing grants for states or jurisdictions that comply with this order and crack down on open air drug use and other things to combat quote unquote vagrancy on streets. So certainly there are sort of incentives they can do to kind of push states to doing this, and certainly Trump has a lot of sway, particularly among red states. So if states feel like they're going to benefit by implementing a more robust involuntary commitment program, then they just might.
What does President Trump say he is trying to do here, and how does that mesh with what we know about substance abuse and mental illness in this population in particular?
Well, I think Trump's message is something that does resonate with a lot of people, particularly as we've seen in cities where there are people camped out on sidewalks, where there are people who are clearly grappling with mental illness in a very visible public way. And so, whether you're seeing it firsthand or you're watching it on TV, certainly this is something that concerns people, right? But of course, in a very Trump way, it's also sort of loaded with sort of very fear-inducing language, right? It's, vagrancy. It's people are, having violent confrontations on the street. And when you talk to advocates for the homeless, advocates for people who are dealing with mental illness, they point out that most people that are dealing with mental illness are not, getting arrested. They're not, violently lashing out at people. But it's when these things happen in a very high-profile way, like we've seen happen in New York City, for example, they tends to grab a lot of headlines. So these are real fears that manifest themselves in our cities, but it kind of gets really amped up by some of the rhetoric.
Where are the advocates on the tension here? Obviously, there's a public concern. You talked about that, but what are their concerns about this idea of stepped up involuntarily moving people into hospitals?
Well, I think the overarching fear is that we might return to, decades, to policies of decades past, where people were unjustly and unfairly being held in asylums for, months and years against their will and not really getting the right kind of treatment, or maybe they weren't supposed to be there in the first place. So that's sort of the overarching fear. But I think the fact that there's a lot of public health dollars that are being cut right now. And so some of that money, they say, should be better spent on helping people in treatment and not just locking them away, sort of indefinitely.
I spoke to a man who's almost 80 who's experiencing homelessness now, has for a long time. He is one of those roughly 1/3 in that population who's also dealt with serious mental illness, as we're talking about. And he said he just does not think there's room in the system, in the hospitals, in shelters for these kinds of populations. What do we know about that?
Right. Well, there is limited bed space. And, in Florida, where I'm normally based, you see, there's been a lot of forensic hospitals that have closed because there has been this push in recent decades to get people out into the community and to get them getting treatment out in the community and not in a locked up facility. So there really is not a lot of bed space. And with budgets being strapped the way that they are these days, particularly with cuts coming from DC, it's going to, states and communities are going to be hard pressed to really build those facilities and be able to meet the needs of the people that are looking to be, that people want to put away.
David Avaya, thank you for your reporting on complex issues. We really appreciate talking with us today.